Okay, my name is Greg Hogan. I work on environmental health and safety here at Oklahoma State University. How many of y'all heard of OSHA training before? That's all I do every day is OSHA training classes. You name the topic, whether it's in the general industry standard, if it's in the construction, that's what we do the training sessions over. This happens to be one that falls underneath the general industry standard, which is hazard communication. In the federal regulations, 1910-1200, basically what it states is if you have a job where you're involved with chemicals, handling from point A to point B, or if your job entails you to work in a building that contains chemicals, or if you'll be the person that's actually going to be walking through that part of the building where there's chemicals, your employer is required to provide you with HAZCOM training. We're going to hit all the basics within the standard during this time frame. So as we're going through, if you all have any questions, please ask. There's some of you all in this group will have some responsibilities within the HAZCOM program, and I'll show you those coming up here in just a second. It's 5 stages to the program. The first one, of course, is a chemical inventory list. The second part is the safety data sheets. And maybe you all have heard of MSDSs before. The SDS has now replaced the MSDS. Okay? They've made 3 major changes within the HAZCOM program. Those 3 major changes you have in the handout there in front of you. Let's go to the next part. The labeling system has changed. The training session, of course, the OSU written plan, of course, is the last part of the HAZCOM program. It doesn't matter if you're working here, if you've come from industry to elsewhere. It's the 5 basic steps still within the HAZCOM program. It's not changed a whole lot there. Who in this group is responsible for doing your chemical inventory list? We've had 1 person out of, we got 2. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Make sure on your chemical inventory list, you add in the chemicals, the type, the quantity, and the location of the chemicals within the facility that you work in. If you have any compressed gas cylinders, please make sure those compressed gas cylinders are added to your chemical inventory list. You say, well, we don't own the cylinders, but you own the contents inside that cylinder. We take your one particular work area, we take the whole building, combine all that information together, and that's where we come up with the ratings for the buildings here at Oklahoma State University. And it's known as the 704 Diamond through the NFPA. And I'll show you that coming up here in just a little bit. You can do the online, the chemical inventory list online. I would highly encourage you to do that because what you can do is once you get logged into it, you can virtually add chemicals. As you get them in, at the very end of the year, you can turn it in and actually have a complete inventory of the products that you use. One of the things that a lot of the departments are doing, and has been very successful, is reducing the chemicals that you do not have to have in the place of employment. So go through, do an inventory of the chemicals you have. If you have anything you need to dispose of, give EHS department a call at 72401 in the hazardous waste department. You will have some paperwork to fill out. They will come over and pick up your chemical waste from you. It's a pretty good system, folks. Okay? Or you might be able to share with someone else within the same department you work in. Instead of buying in large quantities, maybe you can share and buy in smaller quantities. Oh, excuse me. That's something you may want to think about right there as far as saving some money right there, and it works. Okay? I got one of the A&M colleges I go to, the custodial staff members are down to 5 chemicals they clean the whole campus with. It is amazing how many dollars they have saved, but not only that, they can send one employee from one location to another building, and they're using exactly the same products. And that can happen very, very easily within the student union. It's something you may want to think about, and it will work. Let's go to the next part. It's no longer considered as a material safety data sheet. It is now referred to as a safety data sheet. It shall be written in English, clearly stated within the HAZCOM standard. If you do need a supplemental language, contact the manufacturer, say, hey, I need a chemical in this particular language. Most of the manufacturers are putting them on their website now. It makes your job a whole lot easier if you're looking for a select language for that particular safety data sheet. Okay? Let's go to the next part. There's 16 sections to the new safety data sheets now. You have those 16 sections right there in front of you, and they're going to look like this on the page. It will have no pictures on it. Does everybody see that? That is the 16 sections to the new safety data sheet that you're going to find out there. We've already started receiving some of these on campus already. So when they show up, it should not be a surprise to you because you already have the information in front of you on what to look for as this product starts showing up on campus or whatever products you order. The first part deals with the identification, who is the manufacturer of that particular product. That's section number 1. Let's go down to section number 2. What basic information are they going to give you about that particular chemical? That's what you're going to find in hazard identification in section number 2 of the safety data sheet. Go down to number 3. It tells you exactly the impurities, the properties of that particular chemical. If that chemical happens to have a trade secret associated with it, you're working with that particular product, you're trying to figure out, is it compatible with the product that you're trying to mix together? Contact the manufacturer and say, hey, this is my product, is it compatible with your product as far as mixtures are concerned? They'll either say yes or they're going to tell you no. But they do not have to divulge what that trade secret actually is for their particular product. Okay? But they do give you access to actually retrieve that information. Come down to the next part. It talks about the first aid measures. I encourage you to highly make sure you read the safety data sheets for the products that you work with. The basic first aid information is very crucial. There's some chemicals that you may work with out there that's going to say, hey, do not put water on that particular chemical. And I'm going to use one particular chemical some of y'all are probably familiar with. How many of y'all have used granule fertilizers? People's put them on their yards, things like that. Most of them's in a granule form. What people do not realize, as soon as you put water to it, that particular fertilizer actually causes your skin to have burns to it when it becomes wet. So make sure you read the safety data sheets. If it says use water, and it may say that, copious amounts of water. If you have someone who gets chemicals on their body, you start at the top and you start flushing down as quickly as you possibly can. If it says basically, as far as the first aid procedures, rinse with water. Okay? And the clothing where the chemicals come in contact will need to be removed, and that part of the skin will need to be cleaned very thoroughly. Don't forget that last part, please. Because a lot of the chemicals are designed to absorb directly through the human skin. The human body is kind of like a big sponge. Everything you come in contact with, your body absorbs it directly into your system. So do take it very seriously, please. If you get chemicals in your eyes, for an example, it's going to tell you to wash very thoroughly for approximately 15 minutes. That's the other basic first aid procedure you're going to find in there. If for some reason you do not have an eye wash station in the areas that you all work in, and you have an employee that gets chemicals into their eyes, the eye that has the chemical in it, put that eye down to the drain around the sink area and start pouring in water as quickly as you possibly can. It may be kind of complicated. If that happens to be the case, reach over top of the person's forehead, pull the eyelid completely up, turn them to the side and start pouring water in as quickly as you possibly can. You've got to get those chemicals rinsed out. Okay? Let's go to the next part. Talk about the firefighting measures. It's going to tell you exactly what you need to do as far as what type of extinguisher do I use. Do I use a dry chemical? Do I use water? Or do I use a CO2 extinguisher? Or it's going to say, hey, just let it burn itself out. But that's going to be your basic firefighting measures for the chemicals you work with. Let's go to the next part. It talks about accidental release measures. In the area that you work in, you should have some type of absorbent material that you can contain a chemical spill. Now, I will agree for y'all's particular group and the student union over here, y'all do not use a lot of chemicals like some of the other departments do here on campus. You're not research laboratories like some of the others are. Something you can contain that particular chemical with. You can use kitty litter, you can use sand, you can use the little absorbent mats, anything that will contain that particular chemical. If you do not feel comfortable and don't think that you can secure or absorb that particular chemical, get out of that particular area, call 72401, and they can actually send the hazardous waste group over to actually clean up that particular chemical spill. But your life safety is first, and please always remember that. But what happens a lot of times, they ask custodial staff members to come in and clean up chemical spills. And the problem with that is they come in, but they may not have the correct materials that are needed to clean up that particular spill. It takes more than just soap and water to clean up a chemical spill. You have to absorb it somehow, contain it. Okay? Let's go to the next part. The handling and storage. Please make sure you remember this, and I know y'all have this product in the student union over here. Anything you have in a compressed gas cylinder, if it gets hot enough, what's going to happen? It's going to explode. One that I'm very familiar with that has happened within the system involved a person who was actually heating up the grill, cleaned it like they were supposed to. They sprayed some Pam on it, and they set the Pam down on top of the grill and walked off and left it. It did. And that's a very, very common product that I know y'all have some type of product that resembles that particular characteristic within y'all's area over here. It did explode. So kind of think about those things. Same with the gas hot water tank. It's an open flame. It produces heat. So don't store your chemicals within your water closet area, please. That's what a lot of people do. Next thing you know, you have a fire explosion. It's the vapors a lot of times that will ignite. So kind of remember that. Let's go to the next part. Talk about your personal protective equipment or your PPE. Make sure you're wearing gloves if you work with chemicals, folks. That's the best means of protection that you have out there as of now. It is a barrier between your body and whatever chemicals you're working with. How many of y'all wear the color gloves in the group right here? Y'all wear the color gloves? They're blues, oranges, reds. We've got some ugly lime green ones that we've seen out there. More than likely, those are going to be the nitrile gloves. If those nitrile gloves are causing you any type of irritation and they happen to have powder in them, more than likely it's the talc powder that's giving you an irritation. We've seen that out there before. And usually it occurs on the top of the hand or between the crevice of the fingers is where it will occur. Get the powderless gloves, they work. But always put the best pair of gloves you have on first if you're working with chemicals. Everything else considered secondary means of hand protection. If you cut that outer glove, it has to have protection. So kind of think about that. There's another type of glove you all may have access to over here in the union. Gloves known as latex gloves. There's two things to watch out for. We've had this happen as well. If a person's allergic to latex, they'll either start breaking out with hives or their respiratory tract will start to close in on them or they'll start having trouble with their breathing. Latex gloves, latex bandages in the place of employment. That's what you want to remember. Physical signs to look at someone if they're having to go through that. Okay? Eye protection is another important thing as far as your personal protective equipment is concerned. A pair of glasses like I have on is not a means of eye protection. Eye protection involves chemical goggles or a face shield, secondary means of eye protection. Contact lens, no. So kind of remember, take care of your eyes and protect them as much as you can. Because you'd be amazed how many people get something, well, it's not going to happen to me. And you get chemical splashed in your eye, next thing you know, have chemical burns to the eye. And a lot of times they may not be able to do anything to you once you do have the eyes burned from the chemicals you're working with. So kind of think about those things, please. How many of y'all have a dress code for the department you work in? make sure you remember this. If you're working around chemicals of any type, cover up as much as your body as you possibly can. Covered footwear is what we're looking for. That covers the whole foot, not just part of the foot. Okay? Sandals, flip-flops, completely out of the question. Something that covers your foot if you work with chemicals. Okay? Let's go to the other part. It talks about the physical properties. This is a solid, liquid, or is it a gas? What you're going to find there. The reactivity data, what you can and cannot mix together is what you're going to notify in that particular section right there. A good example of that is bleach and ammonia, and I know you'll have that in this building right here. You also had a product at your home. As long as those two are kept separate, there's no problem. But as soon as you mix them, they'll have a chemical reaction together, which you actually may not realize you create chlorine gas. It can be very fixating even in small quantities. So with any chemical you're working with, remember this. Make sure you have ample amount of airflow, please. And I'm going to tell you one product that I know y'all have worked with at least once in your life. How many of y'all have used Tilex before at your home? It's a pretty common product. Works great in showers. You can pour it on top of the table or pour it on the floor and not much happens. But as soon as you atomize it, it becomes in the air, it becomes an asphyxiant. So kind of keep that in mind. Work in a well-ventilated, open those windows up, get some fresh air flowing through those areas. And it works. Let's go on to the next part. The toxicology portion. There's two words to remember, acute and chronic. Acute is something that's short-termed. If you get a chemical on you, you may see a rash or burn. Normally it goes away within a short period of time. That's short-term exposure. Chronic is long-term exposure. Working with the same product over and over without the use of personal protective equipment. At first you see no problems. Later on down the line, when it comes time for retirement, you actually come down with something that may affect you health-wise and may be related back to the chemicals you were exposed to. So kind of take it very seriously, please. Let's go to the next part, the ecological portion. How's it going to affect the environment if it gets in the air, the water, as far as the wildlife is concerned? Plants, animals, things like that you can throw in there as well. That's what you're going to find in ecological. And that is a new section to the safety data sheet now. Disposal considerations is the next part you're going to find out there on the safety data sheet. Do not pour chemicals down the drain, please. If you have chemicals you need to get rid of, fill out the paperwork and give EHS a call and they'll come over and pick it up for you. Okay? Transportation really does not affect y'all in this group right here, but what it does basically cover is the Department of Transportation. What do we need to do as far as shipping this product, either through the rail system, over the road, in the water system, or in the airplane, or in the air somewhere? They tell you exactly what you need to know in that particular section. The regulatory information, basically three regulatory agencies that fall underneath the HAZCOM program. The first one, of course, is OSHA, which is 1910-1200. That's one of the federal standards that deal with your right to know as an employee the type of chemicals you work with. I know there's some of y'all in this group that do not work with chemicals, but you're in a building that does contain chemicals within your particular location. The other one that pertains is also in the EPA. That's the other regulatory agency that falls underneath the HAZCOM program. And the third agency happens to be the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. They play a big part within this HAZCOM program, and you'll see this coming up in just a few seconds. When you get to the last part, it talks about other information. It's where you're going to find all your new updates at. Is there anything changed within that safety data sheet? That's where you're going to find that information. The employer is required to have a safety data sheet for every product you have within the work environment. It doesn't say go through it and pick and choose. It says for every chemical you have within the workplace. Make sure you have a safety data sheet for that particular product. If your employer cannot provide you that particular safety data sheet as an employee, it is your right to refuse to work with those particular chemicals. How many of y'all is aware of that? That is your right. Clearly states right there in the regulations. Two type of labeling systems you're going to find here at OSU. First, of course, is the NFPA Diamond. At the very beginning, when I mentioned your chemical inventory list, why it was so important, we take your one particular work area, we add in the rest of the building as well as your particular location, and there's a formula that's actually calculated in to come up with a numerical rating system for the buildings here. The NFPA uses a 4-color code system. Blues for health, reds for flammability, yellows for activity data, and white is for specific or other information. That's what they're going to put in that particular section. You say, Greg, that's great. We got 4 colors. They also include the numerical rating system runs from 0 to 4. The higher the number, the worse the hazard can possibly be. The lower the number, the safer the hazard is going to be in that particular work area. Here at OSU, we locate them in 2 places, either by the fire alarm panel in that particular building, or they'll be located at the main entrance of the facility. But that's up to the local fire jurisdiction as to where they want it located, because they're going to be the ones responding. Okay? Let's go to the next part up here. The labels have completely changed from what they were in the past. First thing you'll find on the label, if you'll turn your handout over and turn it sideways, that's what the new label is going to look like right there in front of you. Does everybody see that? That's exactly what you're going to be looking for out there. We've already seen some of these labels on campus already start showing up. The first thing to remember is what exactly is the product that we're dealing with. That's what you're going to find in section number 1, the name of the product. Section number 2, it's going to have 2 signal words. It's either going to say danger or it's going to say warning. Danger is worse than what the warning actually is. Warning means it's a hazard, but it's not quite as dangerous as what a danger actually is. And hopefully that made sense. It's kind of confusing. Come to number 3. It has a hazard statement in there. What type of problems could this chemical cause? What's going to be the outcome? Come to section number 4, it has pictograms. We've not had pictograms before on a safety data sheet, and now we do. Okay? The precautionary statement is section number 5. In section number 5, it tells you a lot of good information. It's going to tell you the first aid procedures. It's going to tell you the firefighting procedures. It's going to tell you the exposure limit as far as if you work with that particular product. That's what you're going to find in section number 5. This is what it looks like when it's all put together right here, folks, just as you see. One of the things I want you all to take note of is over here on these pictograms, there's 3 distinct characteristics to a pictogram. It's going to have a red outline around the edge of the border. It's going to have a white background. It's going to have a black picture within that particular pictogram. The United States is getting behind, is what it come down to. We were not compliant with the rest of the nations that were out there. And that's the reason they come up with what's referred to as the global harmonization system. So far, the changes that we have mentioned come from the global harmonization system. And what it came down to was people were shipping chemicals from the U.S. over to other countries sent them over here, and there's no compatibility as far as the pictograms, the safety data sheets, or the labels were concerned. There's a lot of confusion going on. So they come up with something that was more simplified. At first you look at it, you go, man, this is a lot to remember. It is. But it's a lot easier than what it used to be years ago. Used to, they crammed everything together. And it's not broken down like it is now. Also in the handout, if you'll turn it up so it's looking just like this right here, you'll have all of the new 9 pictograms that are out there. Okay, there's 9 new pictograms that you're going to find. We'll start with the first one real quickly. If you look at this pictogram right here, what does it look like to you? Yeah, how's it going to affect your health is what we're looking at. It affects your health in certain ways. It also may cause some type of respiratory problems. It may cause some type of reproductive problems. Folks, the reproductive problems is not normally within females. It's male and female both, some of the chemicals you may work with. And I'll tell you one that affects both male and females. And you've probably been exposed to it out there at least once in your life. How many of y'all worked around lead before? Lead-based paint's another one you can throw in there. It affects both men and women as far as reproductive is concerned. Okay. Let's go to the other part. It can also damage organs within the body itself. The one they specify is damage, but it could be virtually any type of organ within the body. Okay. Let's go to the second one. 2 flames inside of 1 flame means the product is flammable. Solid, liquid, and gases, they've combined the 3 together. Used to they were broken down separately. Now they're all underneath one particular pictogram, which works out pretty good. Could come and basically burn on its own, particularly if it comes in contact with oxygen is a good example you can throw in there. The exclamation point, and I know y'all have seen this before out there. If you turn it upside down, it looks like it's an irritant. How's it going to affect the skin, the eyes, the respiratory? Short, long-term exposure. Okay? That's what you're going to find there. It may cause a narcotic effect or someone becoming very sleepy. Some chemicals may do that. Some chemicals may do just the opposite of that. One of the things, hopefully you've gathered up so far, is make sure you work in a well-ventilated area. And I take a good example we've had some experience with on this campus in the past. How many of y'all have worked with oil-based paints? Pretty good stuff, is it not? Works perfectly. But as you're working that particular room, that particular product with no windows open and no airflow, what happens to you? What was it, ma'am?
Dizzy.
Kind of feel like you're tired next day.
You're a happy woman, are you?
I experienced it as a small child. My mother was painting our living room,
Yeah.
and she was having a good time.
Yeah, it's a very happy product. It does just the opposite. It makes you more on the high side than it does anything because there's not enough ventilation in that area. And that's an example of how chemicals can affect your body. And you probably don't even think too much about it until you become exposed. And right after you become that, you get the munchies afterwards. You get very hungry. Okay? So kind of think about that. Here's another pictogram. It's been around for years. They finally gave us the one particular symbol. Compressed gases. Any compressed gas cylinders you'll have, make sure you keep the cap secured on it. Do not rely upon those regulators. If you're using the product, have the regulator on it, which you'll have to almost. But if you're not going to be using that product, turn the valve off, take the regulator off, and put the cap back on and secure it, please. Make sure your compressed gas cylinders are secured to something very solid. That's the only thing that we're asking of you all, and that's a pretty good thing. It protects everybody. Because if you have one of those valves break off, what happens? It turns into a rocket and it'll shoot right through the wall, that much pressure. It doesn't have to be a very big cylinder for that to occur either. This has been around for years. This is the corrosive symbol. Been around for batteries, around batteries tops. Look top of a battery, you'll find it located there. It's going to cause burns to the eyes, burns to the skin. It's acidic, okay, corrosive. What about this one right here? Yeah, if you ever watched some of the Roadrunner cartoons, one used to show on there some. Believe it or not, it is a pictogram now. It is explosive. Explosive type materials, self-reacting type materials. The power of forks is a good example. Organic peroxides is another good example you can throw in there. The slightest little friction, the slightest little spark will cause a boom. It will explode. Okay? An O with flames coming out top means it is an oxidizer. Oxidizers do what in life? They take oxygen away from everything else so they can survive. That's their main purpose in life. Okay, they love oxygen. A dead tree and a dead fish, what do you think that would mean? Environmental. It's a pretty universal type of a language they come up with, and it works. How's it going to affect the plants, the animals, vegetation, the wildlife? That's what you'll remember as ecological, or environmental, I mean. Skull and crossbones been around for years. You say, I don't have any skull and crossbones at my house. Yeah, you probably do if you ever use any Drano. That's one product you're going to find it on right there. A lot of your drain cleaners will have a skull to crossbones on it. It means it happens right now. Okay? Means it's acute. Training's pretty simple to remember. Anytime you bring a new product into the place of employment, make sure employees are trained on it. When you leave here, go back to your department, cover the products that you work with. Some of y'all don't work with any chemicals in this group, and I do realize that. Some of y'all work with a variety of different type of chemicals. Okay, but it does need to be, make sure it is documented. If the employee changes from one job to the other job, make sure the employee receives HAZCOM training on the type of products they'll be using. Okay, and also whenever you bring a new product into the work area, make sure everybody knows what it is. Just don't set it out there and assume that everybody knows what that product is, because that's usually when something goes wrong. Okay, we're down to the very end. I've talked about the 1910-1200, which is the regulation that deals with the HAZCOM standard. When you leave here, go back to the department you work in and look to see where your SDSs are located. You can either put them in a notebook binder, that will work. You can do them electronically on a computer system. If you do them electronically, the only thing that specifically states in the standard is the employees have to have real accessibility to that computer system. At any time they're in their place of employment, they should be able to retrieve that particular information. Okay? Let's go down to the next part. What are the hazardous chemicals you work with? Every one of you on this group work with something totally different. So go back and do a little refresher on the type of products you work with. How's it going to affect my health? How's it going to affect me physically? That's what you want to kind of look at as well. All this information you'll find on your safety data sheets. The PPE. The employer is required to provide you with the personal protective equipment you need for the type of job you do free of charge. Okay? The only exclusion to that is with your footwear. They do not have to provide that to you, because they consider that something you can wear home. Okay? Let's go to the other part. The written plan is available to everybody in this group. Go into ehs.okstate.edu. Once you're in that particular website right there, you can go in and receive a copy of the OSU HAZCOM program. It's in the process of getting updated now. The other thing too is within the web page, you're also going to find the program itself. Okay? You cannot charge an employee for a copy of the safety data sheets, and you cannot charge them for a copy of the HAZCOM written program. Okay? It's free. Don't get very many free things in life, but you do get this free. If for some reason you happen to have an exposure during the work time, whether it's a vapor, mist, gas, dust, stuck with a needle for an example, asbestos exposure you can throw in there. Make sure you fill out what's referred to as an employee exposure report form. The department you work in should have access to those particular employee exposure report forms. It's not designed to find fault or blame. What it is designed for, though, is where's the exposure and why did the exposure occur? That's what we're looking for right there. But please do me a favor and take care of the employee first. You have 24 hours to get this paperwork turned in, because a certain part of that paperwork you cannot fill out until you've actually went to a healthcare facility. So remember, employees come first, then you can do the paperwork. Okay. At the very bottom, we included our ehs.okstate.edu website. You can go in there for the forms, the chemical inventory list I was talking about earlier. You go to forms and reports. Go in there, you can click on that and get all the information that we have covered during this time frame. Everything that we have covered is directly out of the federal regulations that deal with HAZCOM. Okay? Do y'all have any questions? No questions? You'll have a safe and wonderful day, and thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
They
Did everybody sign in?